Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Welcome to Operation GI, the show where we review open source information on gangs. Each episode, we will pick an article or a set of articles on one topic to discuss. And with me is gang intelligence expert, Dr. Bel Pedroza. Bel, how are we doing?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. So this is a new segment for our audience. What we're going to do is Bel and I are going to get together probably monthly to pick an article or a series of articles on one topic dealing with gang information. This is going to be an open source conversation. Bel's going to give her point of view on the article and give our listeners some extra things to think about. So today we are going to go over an article coming from Denmark, in which the news from Denmark is they have temporarily put a ban on the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. So, Bel, let's just start there. Your first reactions to this article are what?
I mean, my first reaction was like, wow. And the reason it's wow is because when we're talking about gangs, in many states, there is not a charge for being a gang member. And honestly, I don't think any state actually has one where it's specifically for being a member of a gang, right? And so to have the Danish literally ban a group, and in this case, it was the Bandidos, it was really interesting because what was it that took place leading up to that ban, right? Was it simply because of they are a quote unquote motorcycle club, better known as an outlaw motorcycle gang, or is it because they're actually involved in criminal activity, right? And so it was really interesting to find it, come across it, and then read it, and it really makes you think about how other countries are essentially interacting with their criminal organizations. And then us on the United States side is we're definitely not there.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever will be. I think it's fascinating that this type of restriction came on. I think a lot of times when folks talk about Denmark and Sweden, they're like, oh, we should be more like them. And I find this interesting that constitutionally in the US, we can't be like them because it's specific to the Danish constitution is an organization that promotes or incites violence can be dissolved by the court. And that's basically what happened here.
Right. Talking about the United States, right? If we were to be pro banning a certain group, I think we definitely run into the constitutionality of it. We do have the Bill of Rights where they have freedom of speech. And so they are wearing, in this case, the Bandidos, they're wearing their colors, their signs, their symbols outright. And there's nothing illegal about it. Let's switch it up to something probably a little bit more extreme. It's not illegal to wear a Nazi symbol. I don't recommend anybody doing that, right? I think people are going to get a little bit heated with that, and I definitely understand that. But there's nothing illegal about wearing it, at least to my knowledge, right? And please, if anybody knows of any law in the United States that says that you can't wear that, please, I'm down to learn about it. But we run into that. The United States Constitution is very clear with our civil rights. And while I could understand having a group that is involved in a lot of violence, I think complete banning, while the gang investigator in me is like, yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with these gangs here in our country. But at the same time, due process is due process, right? Everyone has the same amount of rights when you're in the United States. And so I think there's a lot of conversations and a lot of opinions, but ultimately we have the Constitution that guides us.
While you're right. I agree with you. To my knowledge, there isn't a law banning wearing certain symbols, but even a swastika. Where my head is going is law enforcement showing association. There is the definition that law enforcement will go by to prove that people are members of a gang, and that will get into stuff that they do, stuff that they wear, who they're hanging out with, and the like, stuff that's maybe a little bit more circumstantial and wouldn't be against the law per se, but the totality of evidence will show that yes, this person is a gang member.
Yes. I think the best way to equate that, if I'm tracking correctly, is basically you have freedom of speech in which you could technically say certain things, but then up into a certain point, it becomes criminal, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with gangs. It's not illegal and it's not a crime to be a member of a gang, of a group, of a criminal organization. Is that individual involved in criminal activity, whether complete outright, right? They're actually involved in the actual act. Did they have knowledge of the act, or did they make the call to create that act to happen? And so gang investigators, and I can't speak for all states, and I think I don't know if I necessarily would probably go down a rabbit hole if I were to start looking at all the state laws for gang. Certain states have gang laws, certain states don't. Certain states that do have gang laws are a little bit more strict than others. And then ultimately, it's a documentation of gangs and gang members. And there's a legal definition that the FBI has come out with, and every state has their own, and it's very similar to the FBI. And that kind of helps law enforcement when they're dealing with a criminal act by any one group. Right. And so it was ultimately really interesting to see how a country decided to go in that route. And we can discuss back and forth, I think, and should the United States ever do this? Probably not, for a lot of reasons. But in the heat of the moment of when we do have a criminal act that happens from any gang, is we should ban them. But what does that mean, right? We can't deport our own people. And then where would we deport them to, right? If they're United States citizens, they can't just be like, okay, bye, we're just going to drop you off on some deserted island and you all fend for yourself. So it was really interesting to see it when I did a couple searches.
The only place that it ends up is more arrests, right? Yeah. Another thing that I thought of as you were talking, where law enforcement might want to be looking at if somebody's associated with gangs, is if that person's on probation or parole, and that's going to be a violation of their probation and parole. That might be another avenue that in the states that we can be looking, law enforcement can be looking for, to see what being a member of the gang can lead them, get them into trouble.
Yes.
But back to Denmark, as I was reading this article, and by the way, for the listeners, we will put a link in the show notes so you can read this article yourself. As soon as a law is created, that means law enforcement has to enforce it, which is, this can be problematic. Not all of a sudden, this is banned, and now you're going to get more calls for service. People are going to be calling up and saying so-and-so is wearing Bandido stuff, and then you're going to be chasing down those calls, or you're going to have officers just see people and then doing stops, and then is it an arrest, or what is the standard operating procedure to enforce this new ban?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, especially when we talk about the current stance with law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies are struggling to hire officers. And, when you talk about adding a new law and now enforcing it, you also have to look at where those laws are and if they're going to be able to be enforced. Let's look back at prohibition days, right? Alcohol was illegal, and yet somehow it was still around. And so when you find something like that, could law enforcement in the United States be able to essentially if we were to ever, which it would never, well, you really shouldn't say never, would we be able to? Would law enforcement and the court system and the prison system be able to sustain that law, right? We're already in a decline in officers, and agencies are struggling to keep officers. They're leaving, they're not hiring as many. And then same thing with the prison systems. I used to work for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, which is the Texas prison system, and units are short. And so you have the officers that are protecting the streets, you have the jails that are protecting the jails, and then you have the corrections officers that are protecting the prisons, and then you have the court system. And then you just bog down everything. If, let's just say that the United States were to ban gangs, not just outlaw motorcycle gang, but you're talking about like the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings. You're talking about street gangs, prison gangs, and outlaw motorcycle gang.
Mm-hmm.
Is that truly sustainable?
No,
no,
it is not. And I mean, and this article says temporary. I don't know if it doesn't say in this article what temporary means, if they're just talking about a week or indefinitely or however what it is. So there is that part of it. Is maybe this isn't something that is meant, maybe it's like a ceasefire, so to speak, like, okay,
yeah.
we need to temporarily take a time out here as we're trying to curb the violence here. And I think to me it can't be indefinite. Like, it can't be years and years and years that you can't be a bandito in Denmark. And I think another thing that I could think of in the US that might happen is if it was a lockdown situation. But that usually goes across the board. That wouldn't be just for gang members. I'm thinking like the Boston
Like
Marathon.
Yeah.
Marathon bombers. Remember, they basically locked down Boston or portions of Boston as they were trying to nab the two suspects there. That obviously very rare, extreme circumstances. That is something that might be, but it wouldn't be like, oh, like everybody else can come out in the public except these one group of people. Like, it's just when I can't imagine that would be the case unless the threat was so high that that's the only way they could get around it. But I again, it's hard to fathom.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting to talk to the Danish police and be like, what does temporary ban mean? How is it really enforced? Is it enforceable, right? Like, what are the logistics of a ban? What does that look like? And how are you all able to enforce it, if at all? Mm-hmm. And how are you able to determine the length of time that a ban is to be implemented? When COVID happened, there was temporary, right? 2 weeks, stop the spread, and 2 years later, right? And here we are 4 years later, and people are still getting COVID, right? So, like, what the logistics of a temporary ban, what does that look like? It would be interesting to talk to Danish police out of curiosity, if nothing else, to see what that would look like. Yeah.
And it is interesting that their constitution states this, right? This is definitely something above and beyond what our constitution does, is it specifically says that if you have rights to organize, but if you are promoting or inciting violence, that's when you can be dissolved.
Right. Okay.
All right. So the interesting article there. As I mentioned, we'll put the link to the articles in the show notes. If you find an article on gang information and you want Bel and I to review it for an episode of Operation GI, you can always reach me at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Bel, I just wanted to finish up because I know also you are on the planning committee for the IALEIA Lone Star Symposium coming up in August. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to do a quick plug for the symposium.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I'm actually the vice president for the Lone Star chapter of IALEIA. This is our inaugural symposium. Super excited about it. It is going to be August 20th and 21st of this year. It's going to be in Georgetown, Texas. We do have a hotel block. It's going to be $96 per night.
Nice.
For any analysts that want to come, it's not just analysts. This is open to peace officers, probation officers, parole officers, corrections, analysts, prosecutors, and judges. And we will be offering in Texas, we have what's called TCOL, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. And so if you get TCOL hours for continuing education, Georgetown PD will be doing the TCOL credits. It is 2 days. Super excited. Like I said, for IALEIA members, it's $100 for registration. For non-IALEIA members, it's $150. Our current topics that we do have solid are hybrid gangs, analyst and officer collaboration, human trafficking, crime analysis, and residence program. And then there are some other ones that are still in the works. And then our guest speaker is the Texas Department of Public Safety, TOD. And you're going to catch me in a lie. I'm not even going to pretend that I know what the division is called, but I know it's training, the chief, and it's actually Dr. James Thomas. He was my mentor, unofficial mentor, when I was doing my doctorate program. And so he's going to be our guest speaker. He's awesome. He's used to be a Texas Ranger. So if that has any kudos for anybody, he'll be there. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. I will provide the registration link. So it'll be in the notes. And if y'all have any questions, let me know. Some of y'all might be able to find me on LinkedIn, Bel Pedroza, BelPedroza. And yeah, no, I'm super excited. Registration is open, and we're still open for vendors and sponsors as well. And if anybody has any questions, they can just shoot us an email.
Yeah. And just to add to the registration costs, to become an IALEIA member is $50. So
Yes.
if you pay the $50, it'll then be $100 for registration, and you get a year's worth of being a member of IALEIA. So that might be something to consider instead of paying the $150 for non-members to actually become a member of IALEIA. As Bel mentioned, we will put more information in the show notes. Bel, again, thank you for your time. Interesting topic. I look forward to Operation GI episodes as we move forward. And just thank you again, and you be safe.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.